Hello again. This is Jonathan at the piano lesson. I would say nice to see you, but I can't see you. You can see me. So nice for you to see me. Okay. Anyway, I get my ideas for my YouTube videos very often just from my lessons that I give, and I have a great guy that I teach in Portugal, of all things. Isn't it amazing that now we can have communication and lessons from anywhere? And that's what I've been doing for many years, long before the COVID hit, using Zoom to teach people. I have students in Portugal and Germany and New York and Seattle, and it's astonishing, and it's really fun because most of these people I've known for many years. It's astonishing. And I know their families. I have one student in Portugal. Hello, Pedro. And he always gives me great ideas. Pedro has been interested in a lot of Portuguese folk music, popular folk music. And there are some subtle points about playing pop tunes. So the word pop tune, popular tune, that's a very general term, right? It's a big grab bag of stuff. But there are some subtleties. Most of those tunes, I'm sure many of you are aware, are very straightforward harmonies. You can go to YouTube and learn the tune. It's pretty much what we refer to as primary chords, right? 1, 4, 5 chords, or 1, 6, 2, 5 chords. Sometimes the order of the chords is changed. So instead of starting with 1, we're starting with 4, which is very interesting too. You can kind of fool the listener into thinking that you're in one key when you're really not. So if you're in the key of C and you start on an F chord, that kind of throws a listener off a little bit. But to really sort of fill out those arrangements, I just want to share with you a couple minor things. So the second in a chord. Again, when we learn music, we learn anything, we tend to learn in a very kind of strict black and white manner. So we learn about scales and we learn about chords, right? But it's really semantics. The chords come from the scales, and the scales are a result of these chords as well. I mean, they're essentially, effectively the same notes. But thinking more in terms of what we call color, clusters of notes, the word cluster. So thinking in terms of not just C, E, G, but thinking in terms of like C, D, E, this group of notes that we might associate with a sound that is maybe a little too dissonant, okay? But it really adds kind of a sparkle to the sound. So you have your C chord, and then you add the D, and you have the sound like this. So I'm actually playing 1, 2, 3, 4 notes in the right hand, and the same thing with F, right? The other primary chord, F, A, C. I'm adding the D, the second in the chord, this. And also in the G chord, G, B, D, right? I'm adding the A. So I have, and that's what gives that what we call, sometimes people call them Add2, okay? So let's just say that would be G, add 2, and very often you see like a parentheses around it, okay? Now, you might think, well, that's also a ninth potentially. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, you're right. However, the reason we don't call it a ninth is because we don't have the seventh there. So that would be the ninth. But without the seventh, it really doesn't have the same bite, the same type of dissonance. The second doesn't function in quite the same way. So we call it Add2. And that sound happens also a lot in country western music. And by the way, the name you want to know, which probably a lot of you haven't heard, old-timey country piano player, country music piano player, Floyd Kramer. Remember that name? Floyd Kramer. Floyd Kramer's the guy you want to listen to. He's the guy that kind of started all of that sound, particularly for country music, country western music. But you do hear it in like kind of, what's the term? Bruce Hornsby. I don't know how you'd quite categorize him. Jazz rock maybe, but you hear those sounds. We used to use the word New Age. I don't think any have heard that word in a long time, but adding sort of a special shimmer to the sound. So if you play it real high on the piano and have C, D, E. And the other aspect of it, another layer of color that you can put on it, is to add a blues note. So you rather than just doing this, that's kind of a pure sound, you also add the blues note, the flatted third. So you slide off of that, and you hear that dissonance right there, that little grinding sound. Those are parallel sixths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, parallel moving down the scale. By the way, notice the fingering I'm using. 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4. Why would I want to do that? Well, because you can connect the top notes like that. There's a infamous Chopin etude in A minor. It's a chromatic etude, and it goes a mile a minute, and I'll just play it really, really slowly, but it sounds something like this. And it goes all the way up chromatically, just with 3, 4, 5, okay? And then 1 and 2 are playing chords, short chords underneath it. So your hand has to be kind of split. Long life and prosper. That was an etude that my teacher, Dolores Holtz. Dolores, I don't think you're around anymore, but what a great teacher she was at the Manhattan School of Music. Very nice lady. And she introduced me to that concept. So fingering, so it's not just what you play, right, but how you play it. Connecting the upper notes in, the thumb is just short underneath it, light and short. You could conceivably connect it. You could kind of snake your thumb. See, look at that. See, and then I'm ready to play it again. Isn't that interesting? Snaking, snake, slide, snaking. So I'm using the fleshy part of my thumb here. You know, we think of the thumb very often as starting from here. It really doesn't, right? It starts from the back of the hand. That's really where it starts from. And by changing fingers, by alternating fingers, you can connect notes. You can play legato that way. So it's very hard, it's very hard to separate what I'm playing from how I'm playing from the phrasing. The phrasing meaning how you play, right? So are you connecting or separating notes? Are you getting softer or louder, right? Are you accenting? Are you, all of that is going to affect the way the line sounds. But I kind of got off on a tangent a little bit there. But I'm thinking like, playing. Yeah, that's with that. Right? That's. And then it sounds totally different up in here. Very often you hear guys do stuff like, that's almost an ornamentation. Or something I used to have fun doing, you can do all the way up the keyboard, you can kind of arpeggiate like that at the end of a song rather than just playing an arpeggio, right? You can kind of do that. And then watch this. This is fun. You take your left hand, yeah, and you add one note there. So it sounds it's sort of a fun sound. I'll have you look at it like this. I'm playing a little slower than I normally would. Normally I would just kind of do that. And it adds just a little bit of, it was kind of sloppy, but it adds a little bit of sparkle to the sound. So that's it. That's all you got to do. All you got to do is add that extra cluster of notes there. I will say this though as well. It's common for, as I demonstrated, it's common when you're hearing these pop tunes. It's common for guys to shift between two chords. So they're shifting between, 1 and 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, and then this is, what the heck is that? Well, it's B flat major. It's F, B flat, F. How would you characterize that? How does that function? Those are, boy, my board feels so nice now. I just cleaned it with alcohol. I accidentally used permanent ink, permanent marker, and then I almost freaked out, but then I thought, aha, I'll get some alcohol, and I cleaned it. I wouldn't want to use it on the board all the time because it probably would dissolve it. But boy, the board feels really nice now. Before it was getting kind of grungy. Just wasn't really cleaning it. I like using a real pen and a board. There's something about it. We're on computers all the time. I love computers. I mean, I really do. But it's nice to have an analog element in the mix. And there's something that happens to your brain. I'm going to take a little side bar here for a moment. So when I grew up, I'm not that old, but a lot of stuff has changed pretty fast when I grew up. I used to use a pen and ink to write my music. And there were people who specialized in that. Who did music transcript music. They were called copyists, music copyists. Now, a copyist today is going to use a computer. But really, the music often feels better when you write it by hand, and actually a really nice handwritten copy very often is much nicer to read than a computer copy. There's something about the computer printed music that is so off-putting and unaesthetic. That's a whole subject, how you print music, just like in book publishing. They have certain types of print type style that they use for certain effects, right, to make it easier to read and to make it more beautiful. I mean, and there's a whole art in that, and the same thing exists in music. It really does. So I used to have a kind of a fountain pen. No one out there has ever used fountain pens, I'm sure, but my father, he when he went to school, there were no ballpoint pens. They didn't exist. They actually had to take a pen. It was called a straight pen, and they had a nib. It was just basically a piece of wood and a piece of metal and a nib and an inkwell, and they dipped the pen in the inkwell. That was, my father was born in the early 20s, okay, right before the Great Depression. And later on, you had that all developed eventually into like a ballpoint pen, but there were other types of pens. There were ink cartridge pens, there were fountain pens. There were beautiful fountain pens, and of course there are people who collect fountain pens, right? But I had special pens that I bought from a store in New York, and I believe it was called Associated Music. Pretty sure that's what it was called. And they had special paper, and it was thick. so that if you made a mistake, you could take a razor blade and you could actually, you'd actually just scrape out the ink in the page. You know, I mean, you didn't use whiteout really, but you know, you really didn't make mistakes either. I mean, there are people out there that are really good. They don't make mistakes, you know. And you learn there's a whole art form of music copying. I had books, stacks of books on how to copy music, you know, almost like a monk. And it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing. And because there's a practical element, but there's also an aesthetic element. There's more than one right way to transcribe, to take the music and put it on paper, lay it out so that when a musician would play my music, and I got this all the time, whenever I'd write out music, or especially my own original tunes or whatever, everyone in the band would always say the same thing. It made me feel really good. They'd say, you know, man, we really love playing your music because it looks great. And I did it because I wanted them to react that way too. I wanted them to feel good about what they were playing. And I also wanted to show respect for them. You know, I didn't want to just scratch out something and shove it in front of a musician. And, you know, he doesn't know my music. And why should I make it twice as hard? You know, I mean, so that actually helped to like create a relationship where people would want to play your tunes. Again, they would want to rehearse with you. You know, they knew that you respected them and it was going to be fun. You know, that's part of the fun part about it. And going back to the calligraphy pens, they were calligraphy tips. So some of the tips were squared off. You know, you had a tip. Sometimes you had like a pointed tip, and there would be a line down the middle that would accept the ink. But sometimes you have a tip where it was kind of squared off, and so that would make the thick lines, say for the you know, the beam, and then you turn the pen, you'd flip it so that you'd have a straight edge, and then it would make the thin lines. And there are plenty of people who know how to do that stuff now, I'm sure, but they don't do it for music anymore. But they should. They really should, because it's a lot of fun. Gosh, you know, I just almost lost my train of thought for a second. So anyway, writing down some of this music, kind of understanding it when you're doing this, right? Well, that's 1, 4, 1 in C, CFC. Okay, the F is the subdominant chord in the key of C. If you could do this in the same key, the B flat, F, B flat, F, right? This is 4. The B flat is, ready? 4 of 4, okay? It's a secondary chord in the key of F. Well, it's a, or if you did, right? But, and then in G, G, C, G, right? The C, G, C, G, the C is not functioning at that moment in the key of C. It's actually functioning as if it's part of the key of G. This is kind of the magic of Western music. So C is 4. This is C is the 4 of 5. I'll just put this up here for a second here. But the C is 4 of 5. Right? And there's your second, and there's your blues note there. Now you could add a 7th if you want. And it has a different effect, right? Right? So my point is that those primary chords are very close knit. And I really encourage my students to not only learn primary chords, but don't just learn one set of primary chords, okay? You really want to do everything in sets of 3s, because that's how the circle of fifths really works. So if you're going to do it in C, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, C, F, C, G, C, go up 5 notes and do it in G. G, C, G, D, G. It almost sounds the same in a sense. It's kind of play tricks with you psychologically. And then go down 5 notes from C, F, B flat, F, C, F, so that you have that at your disposal when you're playing, because in reality, the beauty of music and the beauty of Western music is that we're always kind of pushing the potential of what key we're in. It's you know, I say jazz isn't so much what it is as much as what it can become. You always want to have that sense of possibility in the music. It's not so much what it is, but you know, at any moment it's in C, but it could go to F, it could go to G, right? That was the great technological innovation of temperament 300 some odd years ago, 300-400 years ago, which many know is kind of codified in Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. They're beautiful pieces of music, but more importantly, it's almost like a proof, a scientific proof, to show that you could play in all 12 major and all 12 minor keys on the same instrument, which was not possible prior to Bach, really. It really, you know, that was something that developed. And it not only wasn't possible, it wasn't even considered. I mean, it wasn't even thought of as necessary. The type of music that was made was completely different. I have 2 classifications for those periods. Like in my own little music history world, I have a dividing line of about 1600 or so, but I consider post 1600, I consider that storytelling. Why do I call it storytelling? Well, because typically most of the music we listen to, although we might take it for granted, has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. And we even have expectations that we attach to that piece of music, sometimes very powerful expectations. You know, we expect that the song will last for 5 minutes and 47 seconds, you know, and we expect it'll make us happy, and we expect that, you know, it'll be about a certain thing, right? And in many ways that's worked against us in a sense that it's allowed music to be commercialized and commodified. So I'm maybe philosophizing now, but in a sense, it puts music in a really subservient position where the music, you know, we should be serving the music, really. And so prior to 1600, I call that transcendental. And the reason I call it transcendental is simply because it is more open-ended, and it is music, and I'm generalizing, but it's music that is meant to uplift or heal, or something that might, you know, Gregorian chant, something that is prayerful, perhaps. And you say, well, we have that kind of music, you know, in hymns and gospel. Yes, I understand that, right? But again, if you listen to like an Indian raga as an example, I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I really don't. I think it's much more open-ended. You know, there's a lot of improvisation, and of course, it's the whole premise of the piece is really not about going through a circle of fifths, right? It's about perseverating on one note and listening. There are finer gradations of tonality, where they're using quarter tones, right, and not half tones, and there are colorations and complex rhythms. You know, there are certain elements of music that often recede in Western music, and where in Eastern music they kind of come to the fore. So that's how I sort of classify it. But using just kind of keeping this in mind when we're playing, that F is really functioning as a suspension in many ways. So here's C, C, E, G, right? Here's C, F, G. That's a classic sus4, C, sus4, okay? And C, F, G, okay, C, F, G, as opposed to right, C, E, G. That's just C, you know, C, E, G, right? But this is our suspension, and that's our suspension, and this is our resolution, right? And sometimes you hear this. There's the two. The two is the two is implying, insinuating what harmony? Well, it's G, right? F, G, C, but we don't have to play all those notes. We can just go F, D, E. You've heard that every church hymn kind of ends that way. So, and those two chords, C, F, G, right, they have a common tone, the C, right? So that anchors it a bit. And likewise, the G and the C have a common tone, it's the G. So when you're hearing guys play rock and roll, for instance, you're kind of hearing all of those related primary chords that are kind of dovetailed together. When I do this, it's almost as if I'm implying the key of F, B flat, F, D, G, B flat, F, G, C. You could do that all day long. Let's play a little tune before we go. I gotta go in very shortly, but you know this tune. You know that tune? That's St. Thomas. Sonny Rollins made that famous kind of. Got that second sound of there. Calypso music from Jamaica, right? You got that Caribbean sound. Okay, gotta go. See you next week. Leave some comments.